Springs the Traveling Monkey, a tale of adventure and kindness. Once upon a time, in a far-off jungle, there lived a cheerful monkey named Springs. Why was he called Springs, you ask? Well, it was because he always walked with a bounce in his step, like he had springs in his feet. Springs didn't have a home, but he wasn't sad about it. In fact, he had sold everything he owned because he had a dream to see the world, to travel far and wide, and discover both the smallest wonders and the biggest adventures life had to offer. Every day, Springs would hop from village to village, town to town, offering to help people with whatever work they needed done in exchange for food and a place to rest. He was always happy, always smiling, and he never asked for more than he needed. Springs loved helping others, and his heart was full of joy as he made friends wherever he went. A special village. One bright afternoon, Springs found himself in the village of Zvr, a peaceful place where only 20 animals lived. As he strolled through the village square, he saw an old beaver working in his garden. Springs bounded over with a big grin and said, "Hello, Mr. Beaver. If I help you with your gardening today, would you be kind enough to share a little food with me?" The beaver, who had seen many travelers pass through Zvr, smiled and agreed. "Of course, young monkey. I could use a hand, and I'll make sure you have a good meal for your trouble." Spring spent the whole day working hard, digging in the garden, fixing things around the beaver's house, and even planting new flowers. It was tiring work, but Springs didn't mind. As the sun began to set, the beaver invited Springs inside for dinner. But when Springs arrived, he was surprised to see the whole village gathered around a large wooden table, covered with delicious food. It was like a grand feast, and everyone was celebrating. There was dancing, laughter, and so much food that Springs couldn't believe his eyes. That night, Springs felt like a hero, and the villagers treated him with kindness and warmth. He had never felt so welcome. As the party wound down, the old beaver came up to Springs with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for spending time with us, Springs. You reminded me of my 2 sons, who I haven't seen in 10 years. Your presence brought back happy memories. Please come back and visit us whenever you can." Springs didn't know what to say, so he simply hugged the old beaver, just like he would hug his own father. With a promise to return one day, Springs set off on his journey once more, his heart full of joy. A hard lesson. As Springs walked through the forest the next morning, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, he thought about all the kindness he had seen in the village of Zvr. But just when everything seemed perfect, 2 highway robbers jumped out from behind a bush. They pushed Springs to the ground and snatched his backpack. "We'll see what treasures you're carrying," one of the robbers sneered as he opened the bag. But when they looked inside, all they found were some tools, a bit of rope, and a loaf of bread. Disappointed, the robbers tossed the bag back at Springs and ran away, laughing at his simple belongings. Springs picked himself up, dusted off his fur, and continued on his way. He wasn't angry, though. Instead, he thought about how there were good people in the world, like the villagers, and bad people, like the robbers. But Springs had already made up his mind about something important. No matter what happened to him, he would always choose to be one of the good people. The dark forest. Later that day, Springs found himself at the edge of a dark, mysterious forest. The only way to continue his journey was to go through it. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches like long fingers reaching out to grab him. The path was narrow and full of shadows, but Springs was brave. He hopped along the path, determined to reach the other side. After walking for over an hour, Springs began to feel tired. He decided to climb up a tall tree to rest and eat some of the bread the villagers had given him. As he sat in the tree, enjoying the peaceful view, he suddenly heard voices in the distance. They were shouting for help. Springs quickly climbed down and ran toward the voices. To his surprise, he found the 2 robbers from earlier. They had fallen into a deep hole and couldn't get out. "Help us. Please, we're stuck," they shouted. Springs could have walked away. After all, these were the same robbers who had pushed him and tried to steal from him. But Springs wasn't like that. He reached into his backpack, grabbed the rope, and tied it to a sturdy tree. Then he threw the other end down into the hole. The robbers were amazed as they climbed up to safety. "Why did you help us?" one of them asked, bewildered. "We pushed you down and tried to rob you earlier." Springs smiled and replied, "There are good people and bad people in this world. Good people do good things, and bad people do bad things. I've decided to be one of the good people, no matter what." The robbers were speechless. They had never met anyone like Springs before. As they stood there, thinking about what he had said, Springs handed them the rest of his bread with a friendly smile. "I hope what I've told you today helps you realize that there's always a better way to live, without causing harm to others." And with that, Springs turned and continued on his journey, bouncing away with a light heart and a happy smile. He had seen both the good and the bad in the world, but he knew that kindness would always be his guide.